our second series of Lunch with a Boxer. Last week was our first one with Dean Sarah Phillips, apologize. And today we have our athletic director, Coach Keith Buckley, here with us today. And how the session is going to go, Coach Buck is going to introduce the program, the Pacific Athletics program, to you guys a little bit. In the meantime, I see we have questions already coming up. Thank you so much. Go ahead and put your questions into the chat room. You can have it sent to everybody, or you can have it private message to me, and we'll go through those questions and try to get through as many questions as possible. If there are questions that we aren't able to get to today, please don't worry. We are keeping track of these questions, and we'll make sure that you'll get an email from your admissions counselor or a coach afterwards that'll kind of answer the questions that may have gone unanswered. So without further ado, Coach Buck, we're going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Gina. Really do appreciate everybody being on with us today, and I'm excited to spend a little bit of time talking about our athletic programs and how it fits into the holistic approach of the university and the student athlete experience as a whole. And thought I'd start a little bit with kind of my background, my story, and how I became a Pacific boxer myself. I grew up in the Bay Area in California and played college football at UC Davis in California. I was a rhetoric and communication and English double major. Thought I was going to be a high school teacher and high school football coach, and kind of fell into the college coaching world when I got done playing at Davis. Spent a number of years coaching at Davis, got my master's degree as a graduate assistant at the University of Idaho in Moscow. Spent 3 years at Stanford in their football program in the early 2000s, and then was hired in the summer of 2009 to restart the football program at Pacific University. And I know some folks on here are potential football recruits with Coach Falconer. He was one of the first assistants that I hired when I started the football program, and spent the last 10 years building a football program that we were really proud of, and put a championship trophy in the building in our 5th year back in 2014. And over my experience here, dipped my toes into the administrative side, became an assistant athletic director a couple years ago. And upon the retirement of our athletic director at the time, was given the opportunity to step out of coaching and into administration. So I am just a few short months into the athletic director role, and nothing like a pandemic to start your administrative career with. So having as good of a time as I can given the circumstances, and hope that you all are managing this as well as you can. And I've been in constant contact with the coaches throughout this shelter order, and they are continuing their excitement about the class that we're building. They're continuing the excitement about the future of our athletic program, and there is some renewed energy and excitement with some of the transitional pieces that we're putting into place, so that incoming student athletes have the absolute best experience they can have, both in the classroom, on campus when we get back to that, and on the athletic competitive field. So I am here to answer any of your questions and relay my support of our coaches and our programs in any fashion that I can. So Gina, fire away.
All right. The first few questions are football related, so we're easing you into this, Coach Buck.
Okay.
The first one is, with the pandemic happening, is there any talk of suspending fall sports or football season this coming fall?
So as of today, there is not. We just got a directive from the NCAA, from Dan Dutcher with the NCAA, that at this time there are no plans in place to not have fall sports start. And our fall sports, for everybody that that do start are football, men's and women's soccer, men's and women's cross country, and then volleyball. So those are the sports that will be most immediately on campus for fall practices and competitions. And so right now, all of those coaches, as well as our administration and institution, are planning on having y'all show up and be ready to go for the fall season. Now, that is with a caveat that all could change and the start could be pushed back a little bit. But there's nothing as of yet that pushes us that direction.
And the next question, again, it's from a couple of our football parents here. What is move-in date? What does the preseason look like? I guess it's more about schedule and having the cafeteria and dining open. Are these options going to be open in the fall time for the students?
Yeah, so as a fall sport athlete, and I'll kind of continue to discuss this with all of those cross country, volleyball, soccer, and football. You do arrive earlier than the rest of the student population for fall camp. Football is traditionally the earliest. I think this year it's an August 12th scheduled arrival for fall camp. You move right into your assigned dorm with your assigned roommate for the year. Traditionally, athletes are paired with other teammates in the dorms, which makes that transition away from home and into the program that much easier. And all meals are included in that process. The department pays for the fall meals, so there is no additional cost for either the dorm or the meals when you arrive early for fall camp. And then it's, for lack of a better term, you are an all-in athlete for that first week to 2 weeks that you're on campus before orientation starts. And then we start to adapt practice schedules around orientation to make sure that everybody can fully participate in the orientation activities and integrate with the freshman class as a whole.
Awesome. And if you can just one more time go over the sports that are expected to come a little bit earlier in the fall. And then if you can also talk about walk-ons and how that works for those athletes who want to walk on.
Yeah. So again, the early report sports are football, which I believe is August 12th, and then volleyball, men's and women's cross country, and men's and women's soccer. I believe their report date is the 17th of August, maybe the 18th, depending on their first competition date. So those are the sports that will arrive early and get going with that. And I'm sorry, Gina, what was the second part of that question?
Walk-ons for athletes if they
Oh,
haven't.
that's right. Okay. Yeah. So with walk-on, and that term walk-on is traditionally used with Division I scholarship schools where walk-ons are non-scholarship athletes. With us at the Division III level and every scholarship being routed through the admissions office and merit-based scholarships and need-based aid, anybody interested in participating in a sport really ought to directly contact the coach of that sport that they're interested in participating in to assess the opportunities that are available. And there are kind of open-ended roster opportunities. Football has a lot of space to take participants. Track, cross country have open rosters for participation. Men's and women's swimming. Some of the other sports, there's kind of open roster spots. And then you get into some of the other sports that have limited roster availability. Golf, tennis, there's only so many tennis courts that we can practice in. So if you're interested in a sport, it is best to reach out directly to that coach to identify their needs in the recruiting process. We do have junior varsity programs in men's and women's basketball, in volleyball, in baseball, and in softball. And that opens up a tremendous amount of experience opportunities for individuals to come in and play immediately in those sports, and gain some experience and grow into a varsity level player as they go.
So we're going to hop a little bit back to orientation again. Is parent orientation that's held for the entire campus same or different from maybe the orientation when parents come in when they first drop off their students if they are coming a little bit earlier? Are they required to attend both or one or the other? Do they have to come back after they drop off their kid? Can you kind of go into detail with that?
Yeah. My experience, football specifically, we do a full parent orientation when the young men check in on August 12th. So there isn't an absolute necessity to come back for parent orientation at the end of August, though there are some that still do because it's a fun. I've dropped my kid off for a couple weeks and want to see him again. Not fully ready to completely lose them for the whole semester away. So there are parents that come back and really do immerse themselves in the Pacific community with other parents that are having that similar and same experience. And typically that weekend of parent orientation, there's a fall scrimmage for football, and there's men's and women's soccer and volleyball will do inter-squad scrimmages. So if you have dropped your kid off before, it is an opportunity to potentially get back and see them compete a little bit, even if the season hasn't fully started. So it's really an option. It's not required one way or the other. But I'm of the mind anytime you can get back to campus and see your son or daughter, that's a positive thing to take part in.
Perfect. Thank you. Are all athletes roomed with another athlete? How does that work?
So we do not force athlete roommates. It is something that we encourage, just so you are in a common schedule, in common circumstances. It can be really hard if you're an athlete and are trying to get up early to go get a workout in before class, to have a roommate that's a night owl, that wants to stay up and sleep in until 10 in the morning. That mismatched schedule doesn't always work well. So we have left it up to individual sports and individual students, whether they want to live with a teammate or whether they want to live with somebody else. Sometimes, a classmate from an individual's high school is coming to school as well, and they're more comfortable living with somebody that they already know. And we're totally accepting of that. It's not a requirement, but after a decade at Pacific, it's definitely beneficial for the shared experience and the shared schedule if you are with a fellow student athlete.
Okay. And this is kind of a two-parter question that ties in together. What does a day at football as a student athlete look like? Or not football, I'm sorry, at Pacific. What does it look like as a kind of like a normal day-to-day for a student athlete? And what happens if you have a game? What happens to the class and you have to be away?
Yeah. The great thing about broad picture Division III in general is it is built both philosophically and functionally around the true student athlete ideal. And the idea being you don't have to sacrifice one side of that student athlete moniker for the other. So you don't have to give up your academic pursuits to be an athlete, and you don't have to give up your athletic pursuits to be a great student. And I think our athletic population at Pacific has been tremendously successful in moving on after their college education into PT school and med school and law school, and so some great jobs at Intel and Nike, which are both very local to us at Pacific. And so we see it as an enhancement to the collegiate experience, not the collegiate experience as a whole. And so, and I've been fortunate in my career, having been at Stanford and UC Davis and now Pacific, of institutions that do it right when it comes to the student athlete experience, both in and out of the classroom. So it is built for you to succeed in all of it. Traditionally, when you're in season, most practices are in the late afternoon or early evening. Some are in the morning, depending on coach and facility availability. Obviously men's and women's swimming go early in the morning a lot of times to get pool time. But others just, they enjoy getting the workout done before classes start. So depending on your sport, depending on kind of the necessity, there can be meetings, there can be lifting. We have a full athletic training staff. We have 5 athletic trainers in the training room, plus a rehab room. We are as well taken care of from a team doctor perspective as just about any place I've been. We have a team orthopedic surgeon. We have a team general practitioner physician, 2 other physicians that volunteer their time with us, as well as multiple chiropractors, physical therapists, PA assistants, everything. So from a health and well-being standpoint, Pacific has really invested in our student athletes in that way. And just this year have added a formalized sports psychologist in the department as well, through our Graduate School of Psychology, and have a working group with that, as well as we're one of the best optometry schools west of the Rockies, and have a sport vision program that the dean of the College of Horn with our student athletes.
All right. I don't know if you're there still, Coach. Can you hear me? I think we might have some connection issues, and there were a couple questions that were popping up, and I can kind of go through and answer if we can get Coach Buck back on pretty soon. A lot of questions kind of that we've been getting on the side is academics and student academics and athletics and missing class and how that works is essentially as a D3 school, we have a good number of students who are in a student athlete. And so just let your coaches, let your professors know ahead of time that you are a student athlete. So when you first step into the classroom, make sure you let the professors know that, there might be some classes that you have to miss ahead of time because of all the, games and practices that are happening. Yay, coach is back. Awesome. So I was trying to answering some questions about like if you did have to miss classroom time because then if you can go on that.
Yeah. So in that student athlete ideal, we are well positioned in our relationships with the faculty on campus. I have been on buses and planes and at airports, at hotels, and myself proctored exams on a Friday because we were traveling in physics, in chemistry, in history. So the faculty truly trusts us as a coaching group, as a department to do the right thing. So a lot of times we are proctoring quizzes and exams on the road. Each student athlete themselves is required and expected to communicate directly with their professors, their travel schedule. We don't miss a ton. And that's a little bit of a misnomer at times because the Northwest Conference is Oregon and Washington schools. Most of the time we are traveling day of competition, and at most for programs just missing one day of class, typically a Friday. So it's very doable, and the faculty is incredibly supportive of the athletic experience. We do have what is called the faculty athletic rep, which is Dr. Lisa Sardinia in biology, who is kind of the NCAA rep for the faculty in our athletic department, and we work very, very closely with them. The other unique and positive, as I go down a rabbit hole a little bit, is athletics reports to the provost, who is the chief academic officer on campus. In other places, they report to student life, and it's kind of outside of the academic mission to some degree. Pacific, we are direct reports to the provost, and I sit on a council with all the deans, and are expected to really focus on the academic success, growth, and progress of our student athletes. So it has not been a real challenge or a real issue in any shape or form. Before I got cut off, I was going to relay the story of the very first football commit. Was a young man from Hawaii that was also first chair trombone player in the orchestra. And so he could do both. He can handle both. And we've had multi-sport athletes. We've had, Mallory Heifeld was a lacrosse player for us and also the student body president. So there is no kind of mindset that you have to get away from being a college student and soaking up every ounce of the experience that you can get being on campus to be an athlete. We do want you to be able to succeed in all of it.
Perfect. And the next question ties in with academics as well. How do we schedule classes for student athletes? Do we have to wait for practice schedules to come out, or do students just kind of have to sign up for classes and then hope practice works? And then what's the minimum kind of requirements to maintain a student status, an athlete status as a student athlete?
Yeah, so class signups, being a smaller residential campus, a vast majority of our classes are traditional timed classes, meaning morning, midday, early afternoon. So typically those practices that are late afternoon, early evenings don't have a ton of class conflicts with them. But each coach goes one of two different paths. A large roster sport will send out the practice schedule to student athletes with an idea that you're scheduling with those times in mind. And then some of the smaller sport rosters collect class schedules once they're done and figure out where in the day they can get practice in. So there's been times that our women's basketball team has practiced at 10 a.m. because that was the open couple hours that everybody on the roster had on a Tuesday morning. But by and large, almost everybody takes their classes in traditional times at Pacific. From an eligibility standpoint, academic requirements, we are based off of the institution's academic standing structure, meaning you have to be in good academic standing, and that is deemed by our academic standards committee at the end of each semester. But as a baseline, you got to pass 12 units with a 2.0 GPA or higher to be completely clear of any eligibility challenges or issues. So it's not overly rigorous, but you are in college for a reason, and there's got to be standards. And as we always say, athletics is a privilege, not a right, and you've got to earn that privilege in the classroom to participate in the athletic experience.
Perfect, thank you. So these questions are more concerned with funding. One parent is asking if fall sports is going to be affected, if the funding is going to be affected, and then in general, travel expenses and cost of gear and all of that. How is that covered for athletes in general?
Yeah, I'll start with the second question first, and then go to the first. We cover all travel for our student athletes to and from competition. So whether that's charter bus travel locally, regionally, or whether that's getting on a plane and flying somewhere for those competitions, we cover meals while on the road. We cover housing while on the road. So there's not a lot of added expense to the student athlete cost when traveling with a team. From an equipment standpoint, it varies a little bit sport to sport. The required equipment is bought by us. So lacrosse, we buy the lacrosse sticks. Football, we buy the helmets and shoulder pads and those things. Most need to buy their own cleats or shoes. There are some programs that have raised some money separately to help subsidize that. But you know, it's not a tremendous. We do have some agreements with vendors that provide pretty significant discounts on your traditional spirit packs of hoodies and t-shirts and hats, and but on top of that also some of the footwear that's required, and typically it you know, 35 to 40% off list price because of that partnership we have with some of those programs.
Awesome. And this first question was about the funding. Has it been affected at all? And kind of your thoughts.
No budget reductions as of yet. You know, I think Pacific is very, very supportive of its people, its students, its faculty, its staff, and is doing everything through this circumstance that we're under to continue to support that academic mission, that student first mission, and athletics is a piece of that and a part of it. So, you know, at this point, we are operating under the similar circumstances that we were in going into this year, and you know, it's a little bit of praying for the best case scenario that this turns the corner relatively quickly and we're right back into it. But with that said, I think every single institution in the country is treading lightly when it comes to that. But we are incredibly well supported as an athletic department. It was one of the things that when I looked at leaving Division I football to come to a Division III school to start this program, stood out to me that Pacific doesn't limp into anything. If they're going to support something, if they're going to create a program, whether that be academically or athletically or a campus student life program, they do tend to go all in on it and do everything to make it as successful as it can be.
Awesome. We have a good number of questions about spring sports. What should they be doing in the meantime? I know some of our students have missed out this season, and kind of how that's going to affect the incoming group of students. So you can go into a little bit more detail about the spring.
Yeah, first and foremost, I can't even imagine the emotional disappointment a high school senior in general has, but specifically a high school senior that had this spring season taken away from you. You spent years preparing to have your best senior season, and to not get that is just heartbreaking for me. And knowing what sports means, knowing what sports adds to your development as a person, to not have that is it's just devastating, and I feel bad for each and every one of you that didn't get that opportunity to have your senior high school season. The positive is you're on this call because there's a chance and a belief and a want to continue your athletic career. And so you get a chance to do it over a little bit in college if you didn't get this year. So, you know, with the stay-at-home orders and that, it's hard to get out and actually keep developing. And you know, I don't think you're losing out on your opportunity to play college sports if you're not practicing 3 hours a day right now. you got to find a way to get out and get a run in, get some body weight movements in, do anything you can creatively to keep moving, to keep healthy, both physically and mentally through this. But I don't know that there's a prescription for spring athletes that have to be doing this right now, or you're not going to put yourself in a position to be a viable candidate come the fall, because there is a fall non-traditional season for spring athletes. So we have fall baseball, fall softball, and each of the spring sports does have the opportunity to get together in the fall and have a set number of practices during the fall before starting the spring season. So you do want to do whatever you can to be in shape and be ready to come in and compete if you are a spring sport athlete. Along those lines, Pacific has always been, and as an athletic department, always been very, very supportive of two-sport athletes. And I think last year in football, we had somewhere between 25 and 30 two-sport athletes. And some of those were baseball and track. And we have a significant number that played on our club rugby team. So we are two-sport supportive and have no issues with doing that if it's something that somebody's interested as well.
Great. Do we have any seniors that are graduating this year that are set to come back and play?
We do. So I'm sure some have heard the NCAA has granted waivers to every spring sport athlete to get this year back. So we do have it's only a handful or so who are going to delay their graduation to come back next spring and finish their 4-year career. And I think that speaks volumes to the type of experience that a student athlete has at Pacific, that they're willing to kind of put this graduation on hold to come back and ride one last time with their teammates and get that final experience. I don't think anybody in high school will want to repeat their senior year of high school to do that, but taking one extra year in college to have that closure to your career is really something that speaks to the experience they have while they're here.
So will families be notified if they've already committed to play and maybe there's a senior that's coming back? Will they be notified if they're affected by this change? For those students who have committed as an incoming freshman, I think there's some parents who are a little bit concerned with the seniors coming back that might be losing their spot.
No, I think if we have, as a coaching staff, offered an individual a roster spot in our program, we want them to come. There's no guarantees that it's all going to work out for these seniors, that they can in fact manipulate their academic track to get back. We've recruited you for a reason. We've recruited you because we think you can help us achieve our goals departmentally and individually as a program. And so if we've said, come on, let's go, come be a boxer, that's not going to change.
Awesome, thank you. And then for check-in for students who are coming in, we'll do the midnight check-in for students?
At this time, yeah, the plan is to continue to do that. I think we've moved that up. I think it's now 10 o'clock instead of midnight, but details will come out around that once we get a little bit closer to the summer and are fully functioning in our orientation planning and report date planning and all those things.
Okay. What is Pacific doing about signing for a spring sport athlete?
So we have a celebratory signing form that as soon as you are admitted to the institution, we as a department can produce and send out. I don't, obviously schools aren't going to be having their traditional signing celebrations and those things. And I've seen people get pretty creative with them in this manner of, a TikTok signing or virtual signing of some sort. Even if it's just an announcement on Twitter or Instagram, any of those kind of things. The nice thing about this is it's completely up to the individual how engaged they want to get in that signing. Ultimately, for us as a department and an institution, the deposit is the thing that really signifies your commitment to us, and more so than that celebratory signing letter. It's really once you make that deposit and Gina or Donna or Jeff or any of the admissions counselors get that deposit and get to celebrate your joining the Boxer family. We do the same in athletics.
Awesome. And then the whole commitment and deposit, there are a few families who are unable to make that decision right now because of the whole pandemic happening. When should students, when would be kind of the last possible moment that students can make a commitment? And does it differ from whether there's fall, winter, or spring athlete?
It doesn't really matter in terms of fall, spring, winter athletes. Where I think it really matters most are those finite roster sports that, some of them need a set amount of recruits in a class. Again, I'll take one of our smaller roster sports, golf per se, that if they're going to carry 10 on the roster and need 2 or 3 in the class, they need to fill those 2 or 3. And if you're one of those 2 or 3 that they are trying to really push to be in the boat and you're leaning that direction, the sooner we get that done, the less likely it is to say, hey, if you don't think you can make it, I need to go find somebody else. That's not the case with some of our larger roster spots. Sports that there is some time to figure all this out. I say all that with, again, communication with the individual sport coach is the most important thing in that process, because it isn't really an athletic department deadline. It's more of sport by sport, what their goals and what their needs are in a class. So the more you're communicating with those coaches in those sports, I think the clearer the picture is of where things are at and where we're trying to get them to be.
Awesome. Thank you. And I know there are a few more questions in the chat room here. They're a little bit more specific to an individual student. So I'll make sure that our admissions counselors get these questions. And I'm also actually going to send this to our coaches as well. So if your question wasn't able to get answered, I do apologize. I think it's more beneficial if we're able to answer it one-on-one. So we're kind of winding down here. Were there any other kind of last minute things that you wanted to say to our parents and students that are still kind of on the fence, maybe deciding about whether or not coming to Pacific is a good decision, Coach?
No, again, I'm excited that a group of people jumped on to talk with us today. I think this is making the absolute best of the situation that we're in. And I think I speak for every single coach in our department when I say how excited we are to get everybody back on campus, to get the Boxer Nation back. We have over 500 student athletes in our department that are just like the individuals that are on here today. Great students, great competitors, great people that just want to keep growing through college. And we're excited for the future and excited to have the this group join us in the fall when we get back on campus.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, Coach Buck. I know you're really busy. I think everyone's kind of in and out of Zoom meetings on our campus right now. So hopefully we'll be able to see you very soon in person. Thank you so much to everyone that's been able to join us today. A recording of this session will be emailed out by our communications department likely by tomorrow or early next week. So keep your eye out for that. Again, we've taken note of all the questions that come in our way that we weren't able to answer. We'll make sure either the admissions counselor or the coaches are going to be available to answer those questions for you. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Coach Buck, for your time. And hopefully we'll see you guys next week. Next week, Thursday, our Lunch with the Boxer session is going to be with Denise Giesbers, and she's going to talk a little bit about orientation and student life. So looking forward to that. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day.
Go Boxers.
Go Boxers!